Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast. Thank you to Union Club Hotel and Mike Carmin, who is traveling the world covering Purdue basketball, at least traveling got home from Maryland, and now will be making that long trip from his home to Mackey Arena for tomorrow's game when Purdue takes on Ohio State at 1 o'clock. A lot of interesting things going on in Purdue world right now. I suppose to some people, there's obviously disappointment when you've lost 3 out of 4. But team still is in a good position. We've been saying that a little bit of late, but still there's some things that need to happen, obviously, to take the next step. Just give us what your assessment was. Obviously the first time this year they've gotten beat soundly, as they did in the last 16 minutes against Maryland. But where is this team, at least as of Saturday morning, in your view?
Well, I think they're searching to play that complete game again. I don't think we've seen that since maybe Penn State and Michigan State, where the last 4 games they've had a bad half, whether turnovers or Thursday against Maryland where they didn't rebound very well. I mean, it's really out of character for this team to only have 3 offensive rebounds in a game when they lead the nation, when they did lead the nation in offensive rebound percentage. So that was out of character to see, because they didn't shoot the ball well, and when they haven't shot the ball well, they've been able to clean up the offensive glass and get points that way. But they took a step in handling the turnovers, but the rebounding was kind of the big difference. And their defense got disconnected, and Maryland scored a bunch of points in the paint, and one thing led to another, and it just kind of rolled out of control for them. They're still in a good position to win the Big Ten. You get 3 of your last 4 at home, and not that you take that for granted, but as we've seen throughout the Big Ten, playing at home is a big advantage as opposed to going into the environments that they've had to go into. But there's some individual players that need to pick it up to have some better games. I think it's important for Purdue to put some things together here in the next couple of weeks. I still think they're going to win the Big Ten by multiple games, in part because of teams playing each other below them, that they're just going to beat each other up. But I think they need to kind of get back on track as they head to the Big Ten tournament and then the NCAA tournament, just to have a good feel about where they're at and what they could do in March.
What do you make of it? And I always say I watched your interviews from the locker room or post game after Maryland and after Northwestern. Just the body language. I mean, you've been doing this a long time and watched a lot of athletes over the years. It's just been kind of interesting. Braden Smith, very somewhat matter of fact of, hey, it was 1 game, we're moving on. Saturday is kind of a little different, at least seems very somewhat and rightfully so, because he seems like he's still getting the heck kicked out of him from time to time, but almost to the point of doesn't have much to say and or anger. Do you see any of that? Is that just do you see resolve? I know it's hard to tell in a 5-minute interview after a game, but what do you see from a body language standpoint from this team, just on what you saw after the Maryland game?
Well, first of all, they're not happy when they lose.
That's good.
They're really not happy when they have to talk to people like me. I would be upset too if I had to talk to me after a loss. It depends on the individual. I think Braden's just taken the point that's 1 game. There's no need to push a panic button. Purdue will be okay, and that's good to see from a point guard, a leader on the court. He has kind of developed into a leader. So they're just trying to get that message out that it's all positive. Don't worry about the negative and just kind of move on. I think Zach is just he is a bit frustrated. He don't say anything to get himself in trouble or get Purdue in trouble, but he's clearly frustrated by the lack of calls and the physical play that goes on with him. He has marks on his arm from the Northwestern that they didn't call, and but he has to battle through that, and he has to to rise above it. And and get the job done. But I don't read too much into it, other than if someone's trying to send a message or something like that. Mason Gillis obviously stepped forward and talked about the technical and how important that was, and that's great leadership on his part. He is a captain, and kudos to him for coming out and discussing that, knowing it was a huge play in the game. But yeah, you're trying to ask them a question that would at least elicit some sort of response, whether it's emotional or stoic or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Braden doesn't give long answers to anything, even
No, he doesn't.
after they win. So he's pretty consistent. Zach's a little bit more upbeat and engaged when they win. So yeah, I try not to read too much into it because of the circumstances and what they're being asked to do in the heat of the moment. And for some of these guys, it's brand new. Even though Zach's been playing basketball for 6 years, all this is
new.
This is really, he's soaking out all of it in and trying to handle it all in the best possible way.
It's funny because I enjoyed your post final thoughts comment about the fact that this is a program that at least carts out its players when they lose. And we're not going to make any more comment than that. But that I think is actually a good thing with Matt Painter. You got to take the good with the bad and you face with what you have and shut the noise out and go play. I mean, there are plenty of people in the fan base that are beginning to at least stand on the edge of jumping off the bandwagon, which I think is a form of silliness, at least at this point. But that's the way it is, and I think it's going to be a matter of the focus of this team.
I just add one thing, and I think when you lose 3 out of 4, people start to question, okay, is this team, breaking apart a little bit, what's going on. I think what Mason Gillis did shows that this team is still connected together.
Yeah.
Now, defensively the other night, they had some breakdowns, but they're connected together in their locker room. They understand, what's going on. They're not going to, do anything dramatic at this point, but that something like that shows the rest of the team that here's a guy that stepped up, is accountable for what happened. He took responsibility. And I think that even grows your team closer together, knowing that they have each other's back, even during this rough time that they're going through, that when they get to the other side of this, they're going to be in a better place if they can be in a better place. And I think this team is in a pretty good place when you just talk about the locker room dynamics and everything like that.
Oh, the beauty of 36 hours of reflection here. I mean, and a reasonable voice, and you always bring that. I appreciate that. One of the things you've been a part of all these court stormings over the last 2 years. Purdue will set a Guinness Book of World Record on that, but I'm just interested in your perspective. You watched him, and I'm not being critical of fan bases necessarily. It just seems so silly, not the court storming, but the fact that you have to cart a team off a couple minutes before the end of a game or a couple seconds before the end of the game. What did you see in that? And do you see any solution? I understand you want student participation and fan excitement and all that when you're number 1 or number 3 or whatever Purdue was. That's a big deal. And maybe the thing that stops it, I think Purdue's only stormed a court at home once that I can remember, dating back to Robbie Hummel and against Wisconsin. It's harder at Purdue because they got to jump a ledge. I get it, but what are your thoughts on that? I just think it's kind of an interesting. It's not a phenomenon; it goes on everywhere. But is there any solution to some of this stuff, or should we just let it happen and sit back and enjoy it if you're a college basketball fan?
Well, you can take all the precautionary measures you want, but if a stampede of 5,000 students want on the floor, they're going to get on the floor. So I don't know if you can actually stop it. It's, it can be good for the sport because of the excitement it creates. It's a huge, huge compliment to Purdue.
Yeah.
That happens so much because they've been highly ranked. This is how they view their program, that when you beat the number 1, number 3, whatever their number is, that it warrants a wave of humanity coming down on the court from
no doubt.
Side. And so you take it as a compliment. It's not bad for the sport. You don't want anybody to get hurt.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, whether it's been Purdue or somebody else, when they get a feeling that it's coming, and the game's out of hand and it's over, that I've seen teams kind of get their players off the court as fast as possible. And that's the smart thing to do. And I think that's I don't even know if that was discussed before the game amongst Painter and everybody. It's like, well, if this game gets out of hand, they're going to storm the court. We're going to leave early. I don't know if that happened or if it's like a heat of the moment thing. It's like, hey, let's get these guys out of here before, Maryland's a kind of a rough crowd anyway to begin with. And the fact that they got those guys, off the floor, away from that before it happened, I think was a huge positive. The only thing that might be able to happen is that you have more security, not for the fans, but for the visiting team. Just having enough people around them to make sure that they get off safely. And if they have to go a different direction, then they go a different direction. If you have to bypass shaking hands, whatever you have to do to make sure those players and the staff are taken care of, I would be in favor of that. But I think it's okay for the sport to have that. I mean, it's just what it is. Creates excitement, gives TV a big angle.
Another visual.
See humanity, and it gives the schools that do it the picture of a lifetime that they can hang somewhere to see that sea of humanity on the court. So it's all good. And as you said, Purdue, it's really hard to storm the court because there's only a couple ways to get down there without really risking severe injury. And I think that's more of an issue than anything. But if Purdue's 1 or 2 or 3 in the country, they're not going to have the opportunity to storm the court because teams it's not going to be highly ranked. But I think it's good. It's not. I don't think it's anything that needs to change other than some subtle safety situation.
Yeah, I know. Post Northwestern, I guess it was Mason Gillis got a little bit of. They talked about a pinball situation where they got kind of locked in there. It's
hard. It's hard. And that game was still kind of a little bit in doubt. You didn't want to take your team off, but and that's a very small gym, small arena, and the students come at you from both sides because they're in both end zones, so it's kind of hard to get out of there. And fortunately for Purdue, nobody got hurt in that situation.
Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about Ohio State. The Buckeyes, since they were ranked 24th when they played Purdue back on the 5th of January, and of course, it took a Fletcher Lawyer jumper at the buzzer, kind of the same play of the Michigan State win, except that Edey passed it out to him and Lawyer hit it. The world has changed for Ohio State, so much so that I think they got they on their way home from Iowa, another game where they got beat soundly. They've been beat soundly in the last 2 games, beaten by Michigan State, and then of course at home, and then going to Iowa, and then made their trip back to West Lafayette. Actually, I think practiced at West-Ade High School yesterday. This is a team that's got some talent, though. I mean, and certainly can cause some problems if you're not careful. Purdue, certainly Bryce Sensabaugh and others. Do you see what do you see from them tomorrow? Chris Holtman's under a fair amount of angst. I don't know if it's long-term angst, but certainly for this year. But do you see a game that is dangerous for Purdue tomorrow?
I think it's going to be a much different game because if you remember, Zed Key left that game 4 minutes into it with a shoulder injury and didn't return, and he was their best option to defend Zach Edey. Now he's back playing, assuming he can stay on the court for a full game, then he gives them their best chance to try to slow down Edey. But they are very talented in the backcourt. They have bigger guards, as most teams in the Big Ten do. So they're going to try to disrupt Smith and Lawyer as much as they can. Sensabaugh had 21 points in the first game. Ethan Morton will be on him. But this appears to be a team that if you can get up on them early, then you should be able to control things. They don't appear to have a lot of fight in them when they get behind.
Right.
And if Purdue can deliver a knockout punch or 2, similar to what they did against Iowa and then Penn State at home, then I think that they'll be in good shape. But if you let this team hang around because they are talented, I mean, they're hungry for a win. They're eager for a win. They need something to get them going. They're trying to get out of the first day of the Big Ten tournament. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't know either
from a mathematical situation, but I do know they can't get out of it if they don't win games. So they've got, and this would be a marquee win for them in a bad season. If somehow, some way they could climb to 500, maybe they get an NIT bid. out of this whole thing and save a little bit of their season, but that would have to start Sunday against Purdue. So to me, that Purdue has to get off to a really good start. They have to kind of take the will out of Ohio State early, and then I think they'll be fine from there.
Yeah, it's interesting because Edey in game one, and you're right, Key was out. He only had 11 shots and 16 points, 11 rebounds. But you're right about Ohio State certainly has enough talent to cause some gnashing of teeth in Mackey Arena if that game is. I agree with you 100%. If that game if Purdue doesn't establish itself early, which it's done a fair amount this year at home, certainly played well in the first half against Michigan State, Penn State, Iowa, on down the line, and even Maryland. And yet it'll be an interesting, not Iowa, but Maryland. And then that would be a situation where may make for an easier afternoon for Purdue on Sunday afternoon. Mike, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate your coverage, and what you're doing has been terrific. We appreciate that as well. We'll be back. We'll kind of cut our Saturday simulcast up. Tom Dienhart will join us for our next segment real quick. We'll talk, it's not real quick, but we'll talk some Purdue football and recruiting and Ryan Walters, all things that Mike Carmin knows a lot about as well. But we'll get the band together probably next week. Who knows? We might have Brian Newbert on with us as well. But we appreciate that. Mike, thanks again.
Thank you.
Saturday Simulcast, February 18th edition with Tom Dienhart. I'm Alan Karpick, goldenblack.com. Thank the Union Club Hotel also for their sponsorship of our Saturday conversation. As I always say with Tom, our best conversations, the ones when we don't start the recorder, we're just talking about stuff. But that's the fun of this. But Tom, your day job is a good one, and you do a great job with covering football and Ryan Walters, et cetera. You got a chance to talk to a couple coaches this week. I know it was a group Zoom, and that has some limitations, but you're at the age where you get impressions from guys. Just tell me what you thought of the two guys you got to talk with this week, just your overall impressions of what you're seeing from these young coaches that are now on Purdue's staff.
Back in January, I did get a little confab with Graham Harrell.
Yeah.
I talked to Kevin Kane too. So kind of was able to give people a little glimpse then. And now they're starting these Zooms, Alan. And we talked to Kevin Kane again, the defensive coordinator. Good guy and good background. He's a Kansas guy, played for Mark Mangino.
Yeah.
So, he's interesting. But the guy we talked to first was Corey Patterson.
Right, Corey.
I've known Corey for a few years. Corey came, like Kevin Kane, they both came from Illinois with Ryan Walters. Corey was actually at Illinois before Ryan got there. Corey was hired by Lovie Smith, and he initially was the tight ends coach there. And then when Brett Bielema took over, Brett retained Corey Patterson and had Corey coaching running backs. Corey's from St. Louis. He was a high school coach in St. Louis for Trinity Catholic, which was a small Catholic school that he made into a superpower, Alan. To the point where schools would just forfeit games. Well, playing they're that good, they were afraid they would get hurt. So anyway, then Corey got hired up to Champaign, and he brought a couple players, of course, with him, right? That he coached in high school, and so he's a very engaging guy, as you would imagine. Excited to be in West Lafayette. He's coaching receivers for Purdue, so this will be his third different position he's coached at the collegiate level. And coaching the receivers at Purdue in this offense obviously is a big responsibility. He talked about that. We all know about the offense, the air raid principles. It's going to be rooted, obviously, around the quarterback and throwing the ball out, but it's not going to necessarily be an offense that throws 80 passes a game. But still, we all know it's going to be pass-centric, so you got to have good receivers. So it's going to be fun watching Corey sort through these receivers, Alan. There's 13 on scholarship by my count. And, of course, you got a pretty good walk-on in Andrew Sowinski, too.
Yeah.
And is there a number one receiver, Alan Karpick?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Charlie Jones is gone. We all know that, right? So I'll be interested to see once they get through spring if they shop the portal, if they think they can upgrade and get an elite receiver. I don't know. So that's going to be fun to watch that position evolve. Brock Thompson, TJ Sheffield, Mershawn Rice, Abdur Rahman Yassin, Deion Burks. A lot of those names we're all familiar with are back. So we'll see if anybody's made progress and how this group looks here in March. And then again, back to Kevin Kane. They like their defense, Alan. Sort of a creation that they came up with in Champaign. And 5-man front, nose guard, 2 ends, and 2 outside linebackers. They like that 5-man front. They could be a 5-1, a 5-1-4. Again, it's going to be a defense that can morph, and it wants to try to be deceptive in the back end and give you one look pre-snap and then change once the ball is snapped on the back end. And, up front, the way Kevin Kane describes it, Alan, is that they want to look complex, show you a lot of different things, but still, when you get down to the heart of the defense, he says it's simple, it's easy to learn, and that allows guys to play fast. Avoid the paralysis by analysis. So they're pretty confident in their scheme. Now it's going to be again for the defense is figuring out the personnel and who fits where, Alan.
Interesting on, you get a sense for guys, you've been around this business a long time. In terms of recruiting, and I'm not just talking about high school recruiting, but obviously transfer portal recruiting, just about those kinds of personalities for at least the two you met. How do they fit into that mode, and what do you think their role will be? Obviously, every assistant coach has got a lot of responsibility when it comes to recruiting, but just what's your impression there from that, their ability to talk their way to talent and bring them to West Lafayette, whether it be portal guys or high school guys? Yeah,
big. Obviously, we know the key. Can't just be an X's and O's guys. You gotta be recruiting. Kevin Kane talked about that. He's been a defensive coordinator at SMU, and he's also worked at Northern Illinois as the DC. And of course he was at Illinois, right? So he talked about a lot of connections he already has in the state of Illinois. So he's been in Illinois a lot already. We saw that in January. Talked about Chicago, Alan. Of course, you and I both know Purdue's history in Chicago. They've gotten some great players out of there over the years. The need to get back in Chicago, and Kevin Kane is one of those guys that's taken Purdue's message to Chicago. Kevin Kane is, I said, a Kansas guy, Kansas City guy in particular. We've even seen him way in western Kansas, or I should say western Missouri, eastern Kansas, offering guys in January too. So Purdue's really extended its footprint to that part of America because of Kevin Kane's connections there. Same with, Corey Patterson. I talked about St. Louis. Corey's obviously hitting the city he knows. You go to where you know the coaches, right?
Yeah.
And Corey's been in St. Louis. They actually got a kid they signed in February from the area, the wide receiver. So yeah, they're again, St. Louis has been an area. It's the last coach from Purdue that actually hit St. Louis was Joe Tiller, and he got Joe Odom from Bethalto, Illinois, which is right across the river. And he got the quarterback with Drew Brees, that same class who didn't pan out from like Hazelwood Central. I can't remember his name. But anyway, it's an area.
Jim Mitchell, right? Was
Jim
that
Mitchell? Yeah, it's Jim Mitchell, yeah. And so anyway, so they're kind of, everybody's got their areas, and that's what those two guys bring to the table as well. So I'm sure they're hitting some other areas of the country too. So yeah, recruiting never stops, Alan. 24/7, every day of the year, you got to do something for recruiting. You got to cultivate it to that end, not to get too deep in the weeds, but they've got another big recruiting weekend coming up.
Right.
March 4th and 5th. Now, right now it's a dead period, Alan. The only communication can be digitally. And in March, you start to get what they call quiet period, where guys can now come to your campus. And that's what you're going to start seeing in March, then that weekend in early March. Then guys can come watch you practice spring football too. So that's sort of the next phase. As far as the recruiting goes, a bunch of offers are out there right now. They have the one commitment. The kid from Franklin Central, Derry Hines, is a good cornerback, I think. So I've been talking to some of these kids. I talked to a big offensive tackle from Valparaiso today. And we'll see. It's really early, right? But again, I get the sense, obviously, they're doing all they can to try to cultivate talent and continue to develop relationships.
Do you think that and you're right, it is early, and obviously that weekend of March 5th, maybe they can shoveled them over to the Purdue basketball place, has a big game against Illinois that day. Who knows where the Boilermakers will be at that day, but they like to combine those events, obviously. But what do you think that is it a big challenge? What identity are they trying to sell? I mean, you've got the air raid offense, you've got a defensive, young, hip coach, all that kind of stuff. I mean, do you get a sense yet of what that, what is he really selling? Is he selling a chance to be a part of a young, no holds barred type of program, or is it just way too early to tell exactly what that calling card is for this program?
We're talking to some of the guys. They like just the general vibe they get from the staff, the youthful vibe, I think, which is what we all expected, right? I think these guys connect pretty well. With the high school kids, I think we talked at one point, I figured out the average age of the staff is about 38 years old.
Yeah.
Head coach just turned 36. Kevin Kane just turned 39. And
he just turned 37, right? He was 36. He just turned 37, right? Is that right for Walters?
I know Walters born in 1986, whatever that math is.
Yeah, and he just turned 37. Yep.
Okay, but yeah, they only have a couple guys over 40, I think. Corey Patterson is over 40 and Lamar Kennard's over 40. And Rick Haley, the defensive line coach, is the old man now, and he's 56. So, yeah, I think that's a sense I get talking to the players. I think they like that. Total 180 from what Purdue had before. I'm not knocking Brom on what they had. Just a different vibe and a different tenor, they said. And there's a lot of different ways to be successful. And this group, has really changed, I think, the vibe in that building over there. So, it's competitive to get the good players. You all know that, Alan. And it'll be interesting to see if maybe the relationship building that these guys appear to have, if that can really pay some dividends here. And we see Purdue maybe get some more blue chip talent, if you will, here in the next year or two.
All right, spring ball, you talked about this week. March the 22nd is when it tips off. Is that right? That Tuesday. And we still don't know the spring game final. Do I have that date right? It's the spring game is April 22nd.
Well, it's the spring ball starts March 21st, Alan.
Yeah, right.
It's a Tuesday, and that's the week after spring break. Spring game's going to be April 22nd, Alan.
Right.
And everything I'm told is going to be in Indianapolis. Now the site is still TBD.
Yeah.
From the signals I get, Alan, are they want it to be at some college or high school. They want it to be at a high school in the Indianapolis area. Some of the college venues, though, like University of Indianapolis, I heard maybe the Butler Bowl, but I think a place like Carmel High School, a place of that ilk, could be where we see this game played. Maybe we'll find out here shortly, Alan. But again, I think they kind of like taking this show on the road. We all know Ross-Ade can't be used right now. That's why they're doing this. So having this thing in Indianapolis, I think, is kind of a fresh approach. And also, Alan, they're not sure if it's going to be an actual game.
Yeah.
It's going to be a practice, too. I was told that. They're not sure yet. So that depends on what your roster looks like, if you can field two teams. We've seen teams have to get creative for their spring game before. So it doesn't really matter. People just want to see you out there running some plays. And, hey, Alan, spring football is everybody's unbeaten. Everybody's possibilities are endless. There's nothing like the off season, Alan. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You go through the summer, everybody gets excited. The magazines come out. You're flipping through the magazines. You're looking at schedules. You're getting excited, looking at depth charts. You're trying to pick games you're going to win and lose. Off season sometimes is as much fun sometimes more fun, Alan.
Yeah.
Sometimes more fun.
All the roster moves, even that. And
roster moves, everything.
Coaching moves.
Hypotheticals galore. It's a lot of fun. So that's what's going on with football. Yeah, the spring game. Recruiting, like I said, I put together a list of like 10 top Indiana guys. I think Purdue's trying to hone in on. And like I said, the staff is complete. They've been adding these analysts here of late as well, bringing in some GAs. By and large, it's all systems go so far, and it's just going to be going to be a lot of fun. September 2nd, Alan, Fresno State is the home game, and those renovations, Mike Babinski said, will be ready to go.
Yeah,
I think I talked about that last week. Maybe the one thing is that the food dining facility, Alan,
It's take another year, right?
Yeah, it's not going to open until the summer of 24, where I think before it was January of 24. So that's getting kicked back about 6 months. And that's going to be a supply chain issue there. And not to keep unloading info on you, but again, maybe we talked about the contract last week too for Ryan Walters a couple weeks ago. Last I checked, the assistants still haven't signed their contracts. But I'm told, Alan, 3 assistants have 3-year deals. Everybody else is on a 2-year contract. The assistants with a 3-year deal are Corey Patterson, who also has an associate head coach title.
Right.
Associate head coach / receivers coach. And of course, you got your 2 coordinators, Graham Harrell, Kevin Kane. Now, Purdue's never given out 3-year contracts to assistant coaches in football. I know Jeff Brom never had coaches with 3-year contracts. I'm also told too, that Graham Harrell, by the time he hits the 3rd year of his contract, we're making $1 million. Did you ever think? You ever think you'd see that, Alan Karpick?
No. God, I can remember when they were making $150,000, and Joe Tiller was struggling with that notion, and our friend Brock Spack would just roll his eyes in this deal.
Ryan Walters making $1 million in Illinois.
Yeah.
So Purdue, honestly, Purdue's probably one of the last Big Ten schools. They're not there yet to have $1 million coordinator. I would think every other Big Ten school has had
maybe Indiana.
Maybe Indiana has, yeah, but Northwestern too. I think the schools out east all have, of course, the Michigan schools. But anyway, it's the going rate, I don't want to get off on a tangent about the value of football. People like to shake their fist and think they can cut their spending, but football is what pays the bills, Alan Karpick.
Yeah.
And people, I don't want to get off on a tangent. So anyway, I just think it's a sign that of Purdue's continued investment in football.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. And I had a chance to talk to new president Mung Chang on that, and he did not do anything to make you feel like they weren't going to be committed to trying to do what it takes to get things done. And they know they have to.
Now, last year, 2023 is going to be probably our last year for divisions too, Alan.
Yeah.
2024 is going to be a watershed year in college football. The playoff goes to 12 teams. The Big Ten brings in USC and UCLA. The SEC brings in Oklahoma and Texas. Again, probably just single division football. It's going to be, we've got one more year of this, and then it really is going to change up in 2024. At least there's nothing official from the Big Ten about ditching divisions, but that's sort of what everybody seems to be pointing toward, is they're probably going to eliminate this East-West configuration and just have one big division here.
Yeah, always a lot to talk about, and interesting roster move. Jared Parker, who's a good friend of ours, and a guy that was a great guy and was, of course, Purdue's interim head coach after the firing of Darrell Hazel, gets the offensive coordinator position at Notre Dame for Marcus Freeman's staff. Again, and Jack Swarbrick, the AD at Notre Dame, is getting criticism for not, they obviously had an opportunity to get it. There was a lot of talk about other offensive coordinators in the fold, and Jared ends up getting the opportunity. So it's an interesting world out there, my friend, and there's nothing ever staying the same in the world of college sports.
Andy Ludwig, they wanted to hire Andy Ludwig.
Right, paraded Andy around, didn't want to pay his buyout.
And I guess Notre Dame's, because Notre Dame's got a reputation. They don't throw their money around, Alan.
No, and Brian Kelly leaves, and I don't know all the deal, but that had something to do with it. And I think that they feel like it's just funny that on any level, whether you're on Purdue's level, Notre Dame's level, whatever level that is, with a very, very few exceptions, there are some that just aren't quite getting everything they need, or they don't think they do. Coaches never think that way. Sometimes fans don't. And Notre Dame, as great as that, the history of that program, the most famous program in the history of college football, arguably. Yeah. And that's the thing. But I love Jared. Jared's a great guy. And we hope that he does well there, just because he's a good dude, and Marcus the same way. So no question.
Yeah, Marcus,
great
guy. Yeah, super
great guy, and they got a big job ahead of him, and as does Ryan Walters, and that's just going to be fun to watch. And the two will go head to head, right, in 2024.
Keep waiting. Is that when it picks back up again? 24.
Right. I think if that all stays on the schedule, which I'm assuming it will.
I missed those games, Alan Karpick. That was
Yeah.
when you had it every year, you sort of took it for granted, right? You didn't
Yeah.
realize how special. I'll speak for myself.
Oh yeah.
Realize how special it was to play Notre Dame every year. People kill to do that. And Purdue was able to do that for what, 50 years?
1947 to 2013. So that's a 60.
Cool. I mean,
that's 66 years in a row, right? And it's they
have the benefit of Purdue more than Notre Dame,
and that was ended up being probably the ending of the deal. But if the Irish come to Ross-Ade next year, which is anticipated, it'll be the first time since Daryl Hazel's first year in 2013 since Notre Dame has been to West Lafayette. And I remember the last game before 2 years before the 21 season.
Oh.
Obviously, was the game in Indianapolis in 2014, right? So,
and then Purdue played up there in 2021. I went up there,
right?
But yeah, they haven't played in Ross-Ade. Well, that game in Indy was also a Notre Dame home game, though.
Right. They kind of had some funky way to get out of it. That was kind of I can't remember the whole deal with and Morgan Burke was definitely involved with that, of trying to get that worked out because Notre Dame wanted out.
Really? Because
if it's commitment to, as I understand it, commitment to their, obviously the ACC, they had 5 games they had to deal with, and that's how it worked out. So I agree with you. It is a big part of Purdue's
Got some
history.
good memories. Got some good
You could argue, and some people don't like it when you say this, but really Purdue football got put on the map because it beat Notre Dame in the 1950s. In 1950, 1954, both years Notre Dame _1 and Purdue. Legends were made, not only Dale Samuels, but Len Dawson. And then, of course, Bob Greasy, Mike Phipps. Those were
Mark Carmin, Jim Everett.
That's right.
Greasy beat him too. Remember that story, Alan, too. That was how Neil Armstrong heard about Purdue, wasn't it?
Right. Because he saw him on the newsreels.
How that story goes, or a newsreel.
Right, when Purdue beat Notre Dame on October 7th, 1950. And he happened to be watching a newsreel in Western Ohio and said, Purdue sounds like an interesting place. And of course, Neil graduated.
Purdue's most famous alum outside of Alan Karpick.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure. You better check the transcript. Make sure I graduated. I did. I think so, at least. I don't know. That's one of my reoccurring dreams. Like, wait, did I miss a class and my degree's not done? I got 2 of them, but yeah. But I think I'm not even on the short list there when it comes. They
wouldn't even look at my application today, Alan.
Yeah, that's true of me too. All right, my friend, we're going to have a little bit more talk some basketball as well. I think the way this is going to be pieced together, we may have already talked basketball with Mike Carmin. Obviously, Purdue will have a big game on Sunday against Ohio State, try to get that ship righted. And then obviously Indiana comes calling, and what will be a Donnybrook, I think, in Mackey Arena on the 25th. So it'll be a classic. So that is certainly shaping up to that. So, all right, Tom, thanks so much. Thank the Union Club Hotel. And we'll look forward to more of our Saturday conversation. It's just that, a conversation, and we'll look forward to doing that here next week. Take care, all.